I think is crucially important and too often overlooked. The value that that the opportunity that higher education represents for recruiting veterans. So we have an esteemed panel here to talk this all over, and this session will be moderated by my old friend Jared Lyon from Student Veterans of America, and really looking forward to everything. Jared, please take it away.
Beautiful. So good morning, everybody. My name is Jared Lyon. I'm going to quickly introduce myself, give you some brief statistics that I think might deliver some value to the room relative to our nation's student veteran population. Then I'm going to ask our esteemed panel to quickly introduce themselves, and then I've got some questions ready to go for them. So again, Jared Lyon. I lead an organization called Student Veterans of America. We're based in Washington, D.C., but we operate campus-based chapters at 1,647 college and university campuses in all 50 states, U.S. territories, and 3 countries overseas. And where there is currently an SVA chapter operating, there's just over 754,000 student veterans on a campus with an SVA chapter. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy, was able to use the GI Bill for an associate's degree, a bachelor's, and a master's. I'm all out of education benefits, but I'm actually a third-year PhD student at Syracuse University. So if anyone can remember Hair Club for Men, I'm not just a student veteran, I'm also the president. So just to give you a couple of brief statistics that I think will help set the stage for our conversation this morning. So when we look at our nation's student veteran population, there's a lot of myth and misnomer and anecdote and assumption that goes into describing who this population is. At SVA, we're massive dorks and we do a ton of research. So I'd like to share a little bit about that with you to help us set our stage this morning for our conversation. So today's student veterans nationwide, the first question we always get asked is how many student veterans are there in the United States? Does anyone know the answer to that? I ask that honestly because nobody knows the answer to that. So it's the best we have is an estimate, and it's currently estimated at about 1.4 million. And the reason it's an estimate is because what most people have the ability to report on is GI Bill usage or other federal or state education benefits for veterans. If you include all of those and you include active duty tuition assistance, just to sort of be as inclusive as you can, you're literally looking at only about 800,000 students. And I did not include family members in that number. If you did, add about 140,000 on top of that. So when you're looking at this population, the first thing to understand is that words matter a great deal. And nobody has good words for this population, mostly because we don't have generally accepted definitions. The U.S. Department of Education defines a veteran, a student veteran specifically, or as they call it in more Tommy boy language, a veteran student. A veteran student is somebody who's been in school a very long time. A student veteran is somebody who served their country in uniform and then has gone back to college. But as they define it, it is anybody, stay with me, that is an ROTC cadet currently on scholarship, that is in the military, that is back in school, that is in the Guard or Reserves, is a veteran, or is a family member of any of those categories. That's how the U.S. Department of Education defines student veterans. You just noticed that that is not necessarily who student veterans are. Even more further, some people favor the definition military connected as a way to be a blanket statement. I would articulate that if you could favor language that is more inclusive and just sort of take a page out of understanding the nuance of the population, it's not all that difficult to say student veterans, military connected students, because a military connected student still has a connection to the military. And if you've gotten out of the military and you didn't retire, what does the DoD call it? Separated, right? So you're not really connected anymore if you've been separated. And then from there, there's family members of those categories. Family member could be a spouse, a child, or a live-in partner. And then beyond that, we also have caregivers and survivors. And survivors of the military have definitely lost their connection to the military. And just some brief statistics to lay the groundwork. This population, beyond how many of them are in school, it's where are they going to school and what are they majoring in? So the first thing to note is about 74% of the transitioning service members, that's going to be Guard, Reserve, and active duty, but 74% on average will find themselves in a college classroom within 9 months of returning home to wherever they are after taking off the cloth of our nation. That is widely misunderstood, but it is the truth. And of that population, 87% do one of two things. So I'm not talking about retirees, I'm talking about people who mostly serve 6 years or less. But 87% of them will do one of two things when they get out. They're going to return home to where they are from or their significant other is from. So if you ever do any state advocacy, one of the things to know is that only about 17% of the active duty force will ever reach a retirement. That notwithstanding, when you look at the population, the vast majority of folks that enlist into the armed forces from a hometown, 9 out of 10 times, they're actually coming back to that same community 6 years or less. So it's just something to kind of think about when we're trying to attract veteran talent. It's about meeting them where they are. Beyond that, about 17% of veterans are in community college, 68% are in four-year programs, and the balance of that left over is in graduate school. The top 3 degrees that veterans are graduating in right now at the enlisted ranks are business, science, technology, engineering, and math, and health-related fields. That accounts for about 54% of the population that is graduating. Nationwide GPA for veterans at the undergraduate level right now is a 3.43, and the nationwide success rate for veterans, most people use the word graduation rate. Graduation rate it's sticky, but it's defined as a first-time full-time student who's enrolled at the same college that they started in and graduates inside of 6 years. That's what graduation from college means technically. If you look at those numbers, very few people ever graduate, because if you transfer schools, if you change majors, you're not counted in that overall number. So better number is what the U.S. Department of Education defines as success rate. And the success rate for veterans right now is 76%, meaning 76% are graduating. And right now, that's about 200,000 are graduating college every year and looking for work when they do. So that sets the stage very quickly with some statistics. I'd like to just go down the line, if we could, with brief introductions so that our audience members have a better opportunity to know our panel.
Great, thank you. I'm Brett Gagnon from Fulton Bank. We're corporately headquartered in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a mid-sized regional bank. We have financial centers throughout Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. I'm actually on the technology side, so it's great to be with a bunch of HR professionals. Thanks. I'm the executive sponsor of the Veterans Employee Resource Group at Fulton Bank. I'm an Army veteran. I'm actually still continuing to serve in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard as well. And I got my first degree paid for by the Army, bachelor's in electrical engineering. And then I got another degree paid for by the Army, a master's of strategic studies from the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. My daughter is actually just down the road going to the new school. We're using my post 9/11 GI Bill that I got from being deployed a couple times. And in Pennsylvania, we have a military family education program where after your first initial enlistment, if you re-enlist or if you're an officer and you stay for another 6 years, you get another degree paid for a state college and school tuition in Pennsylvania. So got to figure out who that one goes to.
Good morning. I'm Matt Butler. I'm the Senior Director of Military and Veteran Services at Fordham University. I'm a retired Marine and also a Fordham veteran alumni. When I retired, I went to Fordham, got my undergraduate degree, and kind of looked around and said, how can I help my fellow vets? I took over a part-time job from Mike Abrams, and then ultimately the university hired me full-time in 2017, and I stood up the Office of Military and Veteran Services. Fordham University has about 450 student veterans and military dependents. We both have an ROTC program headquartered at Fordham and a crosstown agreement with the Navy and the Air Force. One of the things that I focus on is helping what is a kind of a Homeric journey for student veterans into higher education. So helping them with the transition from the military back to civilian life, into higher education, then on to a career. I feel like that's the purpose and mission. That is our mission in the Office of Military and Veteran Services, and helping the university harness all the resources that they have, and then coordinating a network of nonprofits, employers, and folks that work in this community like Jared and Student Veterans of America to help us do that.
Good morning. I'm John Lees, Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition for Serco North America. Serco is a defense company, as well as supporting other government agencies, as well as state agencies throughout the United States, as well as Canada. In my role, I focus on strategic partnerships and outreach programs that support the veteran community, military spouses, as well as transitioning veterans and student veterans. Our efforts are to find the best available talent, as a lot of the HR professionals here can speak to. And in my opinion, as well as Serco's opinion, and what was mentioned in your statistics, the student veteran is the untapped population. And I'll also include not only higher education, but trades and apprenticeship training. We all know if there's anybody in the trades populations, there's a drastic shortage, whether it's supporting shipbuilding, submarine building, aircraft repair. Those skills are coming out of the military, and the folks who go on to get higher certifications in those areas it's just an advantage to be able to kind of support the nation's programs in the defense sector. I'm a retired veteran, retired 30-year Navy Command Master Chief, retired in 2015, and I am driven by my passions to be able to support the veteran community. That's why I do what I do. So it's great to be here.
Thanks very much, Master Chief. So I was a former petty officer, so I think you have to say Master Chief at the end. So when you look at that, I'll kind of start with Brett and John, just to kind of like have that conversation of where do we find talent. And John, I think you made a good point, especially regarding the trades. I don't think it gets talked about enough, but about 16% of the transitioning force has an interest in the trades. They have already made the decision, I'm not going to college. And yet GI Bill usage for anything in the trades is only about 1.3%. So you got 16% of veterans transitioning into the trades, but they're not accessing GI Bill benefits. We talk about a recruiting challenge in Department of Defense. We talk about waging a hunt for talent in our corporations and prepping for today. Brett, you're at a $27 billion firm, at least according to Google on the train this morning. $2 billion firm, John. I'm rounding up slightly there, but how are y'all approaching looking at veterans in education or training and what they might bring to your workforce?
Yeah, I can talk about our military internship program. So we have a military internship program. So this is similar to SkillBridge, but it's paid. So this is after someone's transitioned out of the military. And you don't have to be in college, but you can be in college at the same time as going through that program. And what we've also seen is, like you said, a lot of people go to the military, get stationed overseas, but they come back to their home. And so having those connections with the home is a way that we get the talent, and making our company known as a employer that wants to bring in veterans has been one way. The other piece is, like, we think about college educated veterans, and I think of officers. Well, a lot of college educated veterans are not officers, they're enlisted, and they have a skill set that's incredibly valuable. And it's just amazing. I brought in, he was a former 25 Bravo. He sat in a bunker in Germany for satellites, and just an amazing talent. And the challenge is, how do you compare someone at that 25-year level compared to someone much younger than them that has the same capabilities? That's where I think the challenge is. How do we help people understand that a veteran with an education is going to be a little bit older than a typical bachelor's degree holder? And how do we incorporate them into the organization? I think that's where Veterans Employee Resource Groups and other transition programs really are key.
Appreciate it. John.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have an advocate in the company that supports that. Partnerships with higher level organizations, colleges, nonprofits, the trade schools, the ability to aggressively, I'll say it in the HR world, right? And recruiting and talent acquisition know this, to aggressively be in those spaces, to let candidates know, students know that there is work upon completion of their programs. And I'll say this too, it took me 11 years to get my degree in a non-traditional environment because of deployments and schedules and family commitments and things like that. And I see more and more transitioning veterans with half a degree, school started, school stopped. They intend to go back, and my guidance, and I think most recruiting guidance and leadership guidance is telling them to continue that process, right? To go back and use that GI Bill, because that's going to make you a better employer, right? Employee, obviously, as we know that. So to be in those spaces, to go to the fairs, to partner with the school resource communities. There's a lot of organizations that at the schools that have military communities, because they understand there's a large percentage of students that use their GI Bill. So to partner with those organizations and attend career days, employer days, and be an advocate to promote opportunities for them, I think it's very important.
I appreciate that. And I think, at least in corporate America over these past 4, maybe 5 years, the big conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think, has really taught us, if anything, the ability to meet somebody where they are is really important. So Brett, you mentioned, you think educated veteran, you think officers. That's not an uncommon thought. But here's just some interesting statistics from GI Bill usage. And to be clear, I'm not talking about every veteran who's gone to college, but every veteran that's gone to college using some form of the GI Bill. So I'm a dorky researcher, so I'm exceptionally specific. So when you look at those that have accessed the GI Bill, one of the things that's very interesting is of the about 74% of veterans that have a bachelor's degree, right? The thing that's interesting to note about that is, does anyone know what percentage of society has a bachelor's degree? Be generous and round up. It's about 37-ish, right? I'm rounding up a little bit there. It's about 37% of adults over the age of 25 have a bachelor's. Post 9/11 veterans, those veterans that have served after September 11th, 2001, 74% have a bachelor's degree or higher in education. And the interesting thing is, if you just do a demographic breakdown between officers and enlisted, that means that you've got a huge part of enlisted folks that have bachelor's degrees. But here's the interesting thing. 47% of veterans, all post 9/11 veterans, have a master's degree. And of that, 89% are enlisted veterans. So the funny thing about enlisted folks is there are more enlisted folks with graduate degrees than there are officers. And here's another interesting thing. Officers that get out of the military at 03 or below and access their education benefits, it's always assumed they go for a master's degree. But about 46% of them actually get a second bachelor's degree with their education benefits, not a master's. And they tend to get a bachelor's degree in the same thing enlisted people do: business, STEM, and health-related fields. Active duty military officer corps, undergraduate degrees in this order: history, political science, criminal justice. I'm a social science guy. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that that's what it's in. And as veterans, when we get out, business, STEM, and health-related fields. So if we think meeting folks where they are, Matt, I'm wondering, and I happen to know an awful lot about the great efforts that Fordham has made, but I wonder if you might talk a little bit more about, once somebody gets to campus, what are some of the things that you're seeing in your ability to meet them where they are?
Yeah, I think it's helping a veteran find a path, find a purpose, and find a community. Those are really important because, like I said, it is a kind of a Homeric journey back home. So realizing that when you leave the military, you go through a transition program, the door closes, and then you kind of have to figure it out. So realizing that, if you ask a veteran, how good was your transition program, there's a lot of grumbling. So we, at least at Fordham, and I think a lot of schools that I partner and work with, it's this realization that we can be the bridge for those resources. I think in your testimony, I completely agree in front of Congress, was that Fordham, or higher education, is a gateway to getting the resources and benefits that they deserve and that they earned, right? So making sure that if somebody is applying to Fordham or to a university, it doesn't really matter, that they are utilizing their GI Bill benefit and benefits and maximizing those benefits, that they're getting connected with VA healthcare and those types of resources. So it's kind of it's the idea of wrapping the complete set of resources that are available to them and helping them get connected with those. Because when you do, again, that going back to that transition class, at least the one that I went through, you get a data dump. And it's so difficult to remember every detail that you were supposed to learn in like a week as you transitioned out of the military. So we try to provide just those just-in-time services to help meet their needs where they're at right now.
I appreciate that, Matt. And I take away from it collaboration. And Brett and John, this next question is going to be for you on that employer side. How do you all feel that employers can collaborate with institutions of higher learning relative to this ability to bring veterans into the workplace?
I think it's imperative from an employer standpoint to do that early on in the student veteran's journey, right? So to establish that via internships or mentorships or just informational interviews, more often I'm meeting candidates at job fairs and transitioning events. I go to a lot of TAP classes and speak on that, and I find, okay, I'm going to go to Fordham, I'm going to go to George Mason, I'm going to go to Georgetown. I'm like, great, well, let's stay in touch. Let's make sure that we keep that bridge open as you go through that journey, because guess what? Serco has a great intern program that we're looking forward to bringing folks in to get immersed into all the great things that we have, and that potentially upon completion of that, we're looking for some full-time employment. So start those discussions early on, even before they enroll in school, if that's their intent, and maintain the communications with that student, because the talent pipeline, the talent industry is, everybody we're looking for is either coming out of the military, coming out of college, or working somewhere else. They're not sitting home watching TV, right? So we have to be in those fields. So start those conversations early and encourage them to continue to go to school. That just makes for a better employer. So
I would just add, like at Fulton, I'm not in HR, but I'm a veteran. So the talent acquisition advisors primarily aren't veterans. So it's that partnership with the Veterans ERG. It's the partnership with other veterans within the organization. So when there's a career fair, when they're going to a university, they're not just going without pulling one of us with them to those organizations and career fairs. So that's the key part is how do you bring the team? And the team isn't just someone in HR or a talent acquisition person. It's others within the organization that look and can talk like who you're trying to recruit at those fairs. The other thing I just recently learned about at Penn State, they actually have a co-ed military fraternity on campus. And so how do you find those organizations on campus that are trying to help the Homeric journey along for that population? Because so much of the universities want the GI Bill money. The universities know that a lot of the students on campus are veterans or dependents of veterans. And so it's connecting those organizations that are helping those students through with your talent acquisition team so you can bring that talent into your organization.
And I can add one more thing about that. So the opportunity to, often when that veteran gets out and goes on to a 4-year school, often, or even a 2-year school to get an associate's, from that aspect, if they originally had some type of security clearance as well, often that time spent in school is going to, put that out of scope, right? So what needs to happen is a little more discussion from the employer to those candidates along with the school. Is there a potential to bring that person on part-time in some capacity, or as an intern, as I mentioned too? So then that builds that bridge to be able to kind of provide a home upon completion of the degree to look to do that. So part-time opportunities is critical as well. We try to employ that as much as we can in Serco, and I see other companies doing that more and more now.
So to kind of pull that thread a little bit, you talk about schools wanting the money. Last year, it was $12 billion in VA education benefits went to American colleges and universities for 1 year, $12 billion with a B. That notwithstanding, though, to kind of pull that thread a little bit, something that people don't often realize about the student veteran population on a college campus is right now about 75% of veterans who are in college are working full or part-time while they're in school. To break that down a little further, the two industries that they most commonly are employed in while they're students, retail and service. And during COVID, we saw those jobs go away first. But here's another interesting thing. If you're using the GI Bill, the federal government tells you you are no longer eligible for federal unemployment. So when we started to make those unemployment concessions for Americans that lost their jobs during COVID, student veterans were flooding our phone lines saying, do I drop out of college so that I'm eligible for unemployment? Because here's the other thing. 52% of veterans in college are in a committed relationship with children, and another 20% are single parents. So these are grown-ups that go back to school. And while they're in school, they have to work while they're in school. And to break the demographics of that down a little further, white males work about 48% full-time while they're in school. African-American males are at about 53%. White women are at 60%, and women of color who are veterans in school are either working full or part-time at nearly 93%. So the inequity that exists amongst this population is incredibly important. And John, your point is so well taken on we have the opportunity to match employment opportunities that are in this room in non-degreed roles for veterans in the degree field that they're studying. So that while they're in school, they certainly can put food on their table with a paycheck, yes, but also by working in a non-degreed role in the degree field of study that I'm pursuing, I have the opportunity to build industry experience and an industry network. I wonder if you've seen any of this or if any of that might resonate in the ability to kind of meet folks where they are relative to our recruitment efforts into our companies.
Yeah, I see that all the time, especially with career pivots. All too often, I go to a career fair, a job fair, and the person's an engineering technician or an aircraft mechanic, and guess what field they want to go into? Cyber, right? Everybody, all of them. Maybe they got a security plus while they were in the service, but they want to, that's their role. That's what they want to do. So they're going to use their GI Bill and go to school, right? And if they didn't seek outside employment or, some significant volunteer experience that they can gain that on a resume in some form, guess what? They're going to go right into the help desk because, they just don't have, that's an entry level role, right? They don't have significant experience, even though they were in the military for 4 to 6 years. They don't have that experience. So to be able to do that in a part-time capacity, even if it is a help desk role, guess what? That's going to win that body of work. That's going to enable them to get to the next level upon completion of their cyber bachelor's degree or a higher level degree. So that's my recommendation with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that's great about the GI Bill, and I can attest to this because I use the GI Bill, is that it provides an opportunity to learn what you just talked about, right? Because if you're making a transition out of the military, you need a job, right? If you have the GI Bill, one thing, it gives you that opportunity to take a minute because it comes with a housing stipend. So there, you are working, but you are, supplementing your income through the GI Bill. But I think in higher education, at least what we try to do is, one, we try to create the network. And I'm so glad to be on the panel with you two because you just added to the network that I can offer our student vets, is we create the network for the student vets to tap into. And we share those resources. And that's so important to making that transition, being able to realize and understand, for instance, that we've got a cybersecurity degree program for them. And there are a lot of folks that come out thinking that, hey, I've got a secret, clearance, but if they're not using it, they're going to lose it. So, that just helps with those opportunities to make sure that they can make that transition.
I would just add, we have a management trainee program that's really tailored to graduating, entry level management roles. And so that's a way we can get talent and to rotate through various parts of the organization. So a typical management trainee, you'll see 7 or 8 parts of a company in a 18 to 24 month span, which then builds the network piece too, because then they understand, well, maybe I want to do cyber, but then they find out like cyber is not really that fun. So then they can do something else within the bank. So that's been another way. And I think there's also an opportunity for us to continue to encourage self-identification. There's still a reluctance, whether it's veterans, student veterans, to self-identify. So sometimes they get out of the military, they go to school, and they're trying to put some of that to the side, and they're not leveraging the skills and experiences they gained from being in the military. So, how do we help make it okay to be a veteran and to self-identify as a veteran as you're looking for a position as you're transitioning?
So cyber is the number 5 undergraduate major that veterans graduate with. Had to throw that out there. But Brett, I want to pull the thread on self-identification a little bit. So the research that we've done at SVA has been really kind of fascinating in this category. One of the things that we've learned is the number one thing that a veteran does not identify as within their first 5 years of taking off the uniform. Any guesses? It's a veteran. They don't identify as a veteran. And this kind of blew our mind. It's not that they don't understand that they are veterans. It's not a technical thing. It's not a law thing. They know they're veterans. But that caused us to kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole on really what they call the body of literature that is identity research. And what we have learned is that soldier, sailor, Marine, these are identities. But veteran isn't something that the population is necessarily identifying as within their first 5 years. Break this down demographically into other underrepresented communities, and it can get more challenging. Take women veterans, for instance. Women veterans make up about 11% of the nation's veteran population. Active duty is 19% and growing. If you add in Guard and Reserve, that can go up a little bit. But when we look at student veterans, right now, 39% of all women who are, or all students that are veterans are women. And then about 50% of SVA's chapter presidents nationwide are women veterans. And so when we start thinking about the ability to self-identify, it's as difficult to get student veterans on a campus to identify and affiliate with like a student veteran group or a student veteran fraternity, as you've mentioned, or even an employee resource group. What are some things that y'all have found that are successful in helping veterans be comfortable identifying as a veteran, either through the hiring process or once they've joined your institution of higher learning or companies?
So I think it starts early on in the process. I know for the hiring process to build that bond of, I call it continuing mission, right? So for the veteran coming right out of the military to come into work, or the veteran who's been out in the the workforce now coming to the company that I'm at, continuing mission, and to establish that bond that, guess what, we value that work ethic, and that is important to us. And your background is critical to our mission success, because we're in the defense sector. So we still support this great nation, and you're coming on board to do that as well. I would recommend, I'm not in education, but I recommend the same type of concept, to welcome them with open arms, to make it inclusive, and just to be a strong environment where they could flourish. So start that early on in the conversation, that there is no stigma in that at all. And that, I think, is critical to the success of that.
When I first started, I latched on to Student Veterans of America as a way for one to have something that veterans who take off the uniform kind of lose a little self-identity, sense of purpose, sense of belonging, that could be the thing that people could share in, right? So that's why I think student veteran chapters on campuses are really important, because they fill that void that is created when you leave service. There's a community there that the vet to vet network is really strong. And I would say that it's even stronger when you're talking about employment opportunities and utilizing the veteran resource groups at companies. And understanding there's specific pathways for veterans for jobs. So yeah, really just giving them a sense of belonging, making them feel like they belong on campus is really important. Like that they're full members of the community is really important to help that transition.
Yeah, I think another thing is people don't know how it's being used. Like if I click this button, what happens? You know, I'm not sure. It doesn't really tell me. There's a bunch of legal terms and which category am I in? Protected veteran, non-protected? Like it's very confusing and daunting. So how do we make it welcoming to self-identify? How do we make it welcoming? Like we start asking now if you're a military spouse or we're formerly a military spouse as well. You know, the way self-identification becomes more apparent at how it's being used, then more people will self-identify. If they feel it's being used in a way that closes doors for them, then they're going to probably be less open to self-identification. So I think it's inherent on this professionalization of professionals to decide how do we use this data? How do we communicate this data? How do we make the application process easy? And if your application process isn't being evaluated to see if you're getting the outcomes, like if you're looking at the statistics and your statistics are like, how come we don't have any veterans here? Well, there's probably a reason why you don't have any veterans. They're either there and they're just not going to tell you, or there's something that's happening through the process that's screening them out.
Yeah, and I think that's a thread worth pulling. They might be there and you don't know it, hiding in plain sight. And it's one of the things, and if you're an HR professional, please do not hate me on this, but like often just pulling personnel reports is not necessarily the place that we're going to find, hey, how many veterans are here? Because in some cases, you can't say the answers to that question. But just as a humble plea for everybody in the room, there's this really interesting thing. So again, I'm a big dork. My PhD uses data science and economics to study the national security implications of an educated populace. So if you do simple language codes, you can find bios and run through them, and biographies, right? A lot of our websites list the biographies of senior people in our organization. But you can go on a campaign in your organization, be it a company, an institution of higher learning, to ask faculty, staff, or people employed by the company that, hey, when we're updating our bios with comms next time, do you mind putting in, yeah, I was only enlisted in the Marine Corps for 4 years, but I'm going to mention it. I'd like to mention that I was proudly a corporal of Marines. I wasn't, I was a petty officer, but you know what I mean, right? List it in the bio that it's there so that when others are reading that bio, even if it was 25 years ago, and even if you only served for 4 years, it's listed there. And ask people within our organizations, again, faculty or staff members, to update their LinkedIns, even if they served in the Navy 28 years ago, list that. And if they were somebody who was a spouse or a child, including that, lets people see us where we are and understand that in addition to all the great advice you gave, Brett, that they can actually see it somewhere. So we're coming up on time, and I kind of want to give each of you an opportunity. And John, if we want to start with you and just sort of come down the line. What is something that I didn't ask that you wish I did that you want everybody in this room to know to drive some value as they head for the rest of the day?
Well, I've got enough stats to fill my notebook up, so I'm good with that. No, I think you kind of covered everything that I was prepared to speak about. I'll give another plug again for the education and the trades populations, as well as the apprenticeship schools that are out there. I think if anybody has a way to advocate with them, to work with them, there's just a strong value in that as there is with the four-year universities as well, because they're getting out, veterans are getting out and using their GI Bill to obtain those certificates or associate's degrees or apprenticeships. So let's not lose sight of that population as well.
I would just say that I realize that there's what's good for Fordham is good for veterans, and what's good for veterans is good for Fordham. Fordham, we just agreed to 100% GI Bill yellow ribbon, which means that any veteran can come to Fordham and will pay no tuition or fees as long as they've got eligibility. And we're like the third university to offer the Veterans Promise. I say all that to say that higher education is a great way to make a transition. It's a great way to find a job. Most veterans that are in higher education are there to find a better place for themselves and their families in life, which a job is that thing. And I think that's a job is a great antidote to a lot of the things that, you've seen trouble our community. So that network of employer and higher education, that relationship is really important. The great nonprofits that are out there like 4Block, I see Eric's here from 4Block. Tap into those networks because there's a lot of talent there. I've seen it, and they're wonderful people.
Yeah, I think, on that trade school piece, I just ran into this a couple weeks ago. We have a really good internship program, not just military, just all interns. Really good program that runs over the summer where they don't just work for a team, they get part of the internship cohort. And had a candidate that was applying to be part of that internship program. And the answer was, well, they're not pursuing a 4-year degree, so they can't be an intern. And I'm like, well, we just went through a lot of our job descriptions and took out the requirement of a bachelor's degree and made it preferred. But then we're saying that you can't be an intern. And so I would just say, continue to look at your processes, and some of these things that were written years ago may not still be applicable. So if you don't have a way to constantly refresh some of your business processes and application and internship programs, like just relook at it from a different view and see if what you've got in place is actually preventing a population. So if you can use the 9/11 GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill for a trade school, but then you can't get an internship with a company to apply what you're going to school for, then you're missing out on that talent pool. And I think that's what this whole panel is about, is how can we get that talent pool that has, skills and experience that no one else in the population has because they didn't go through what you do as a veteran. How do you get them into your company? So just make sure you're not filtering them out.
And I'll sort of close this by I spend a lot of my time on the road. I'm on a lot of college campuses throughout the United States. Just last week, I was in Colorado at the University of Colorado Boulder, chatting with a student veteran who asked a simple question. They were like, I met the recruiter at the job fair. I followed up with an email. I connected them on LinkedIn, and I just heard nothing back. One of the things to think about is we're all busy, and there's a lot going on. For the average student veteran that's getting ready to graduate and move into their career, most of them have had their head down, focusing on school, working, and taking care of their family. And when they're applying for jobs, really what they don't understand, but you do, is it's a learning opportunity. It's sort of one of these things looks like the other. When you're looking at a veteran that may apply, just understand that might have been the first job that they had the courage to apply for. And even if they're not a good fit, it can go a long way for you to do some hip pocket mentoring, to look at them as an opportunity to say, hey, maybe this isn't for us, but I'm going to set aside an extra 30 minutes. I'm going to write them a thoughtful email and offer time to meet with them. It can go so far. 68% of veterans that are in college right now are just like me, the first person in their family ever to go to college. First generation college students that are exceptionally diverse, and they're looking for their next opportunity. The work you do in this room, I just from the bottom of my heart want to thank you, because you have the opportunity to change lives and impact them in such a positive way. Thank you for what you do. And if we could get a round of applause for this incredible panel.